I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition. Stuck with a $3 billion tab, ratepayer advocates protesting the hefty bill charged to consumers for the San Onofre plant. We add up the hidden costs for shutting it down.
And a criminal justice professor explains how he prepped for college from behind bars. I'm Peggy Pico with the controversy over the new Pell Grants for Prisoners pilot program. Then, two former Boy Scouts talk about the religious exemption for gay Scout leaders even after the Boy Scout ban against gays was lifted last week.
Running dry as water levels sink at California reservoirs. The new calls to save water as a precious resource. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. The head of Southern California Edison told investors the deal to close the San Onofre nuclear plant in the North County may be scuttled. KPBS investigative reporter Meetha Sharma says ratepayer advocates are fuming over the hefty tab for customers, and they may not be finished paying it off.
Customers have already paid at least $1 billion into what's known as a decommissioning fund to close San Onofre, according to Southern California Edison, which declined an interview. That money is meant to handle, as ratepayer advocate Charles Langley puts it, the dangerous, toxic stuff that makes up nuclear waste.
Because sooner or later the plant's going to fail and it's going to take billions of dollars to clean up the mess.
San Onofre's failure came in 2012 and made national news.
Radiation leak at an American nuclear power plant, San Onofre, 45 miles north of San Diego, California. Officials say the leak is small, but as we've seen before, sometimes nuclear plants have changed the story after an accident.
The plant closed for good 18 months later.
SoCal Ed has just revealed it is going to be closing the troubled San Onofre nuclear power plant here in Southern California.
Premature tube wear inside the plant's new steam generators caused the radioactive leak. Those generators were supposed to last 40 years, but only lasted one. And their price tag for customers is nearly $600 million. The California Public Utilities Commission is tasked with protecting consumers and ensuring they get safe power at a fair price. But it never followed through on a promised investigation into whether Edison was at fault. And now the PUC itself and Edison are the focus of a criminal investigation. The California Attorney General's office has issued search warrants for 14 top current and former Edison executives and 8 PUC past and current officials, including former President Michael Peavy. Here's what investigators are asking about. In March 2013, the PUC's Peavy flew to Poland. There he met Edison executive Stephen Pickett at a fancy hotel. The two talked about San Onofre, sometimes called songs. Pickett actually wrote about the meeting in an email to an Edison colleague in which he said he sat next to Peavy at dinner in Warsaw, and then he added, quote, working songs deserve combat pay. Peavy and Pickett soon came up with a framework for a settlement that determined who should pay for San Onofre's closure. That framework nearly matched the final settlement announced more than a year later. Customers were left with the bulk of the bill, $3.3 billion to pay for what's been characterized by the media as shutdown costs.
But wait a minute, didn't customers already pay for this with the decommissioning fund? Wasn't that supposed to cover shutdown costs? It turns out the $3.3 billion customers will pay over 10 years is actually meant for Edison and minority owner SDG&E to still get a return on their San Onofre investment, even though the plant no longer works. Former San Diego City Attorney Mike Aguirre is suing to get the settlement scrapped.
The $3.3 billion is being paid by ratepayers as if San Onofre is producing electricity for the next decade.
The settlement also calls for customers to pay for power they now have to buy from other providers with San Onofre offline. And 4 power plants are in the works to make up for San Onofre's closure. The total cost to consumers, $5.5 billion. Aguirre says customers are being double billed.
They're saying, hey, you have to pay for electricity from San Onofre and then you have to pay for electricity from somewhere else because there's not really electricity coming from San Onofre.
So let's tally all the costs customers are paying for San Onofre's closure. There's about $1 billion for the decommissioning fund that's already been paid, plus nearly $600 million for the steam generators. Then $3.3 billion in the settlement agreement to cover some of Edison's lost profit from San Onofre. About $5.5 billion for interim replacement electricity and plants being built to make up for San Onofre's power generation. If you add up those numbers, you get $10 billion. Divide by the number of customer meters, and you are paying about $1,600 for San Onofre. Most of those costs will be spun out over the next decade or two. Now, Edison maintains that customers have received a $1 billion refund from the pact. The so-called refund shows up as a reduction in the amount of interest customers are charged for Edison's investment in San Onofre. Again, Aguirre.
It would be like, you bought a car, now the car has proven to be defective, so you can't drive the car, and they're saying, well, good, we're going to reduce the rate on the loan that you took out at the bank. So you don't have to pay, 5% for the loan. You only have to pay 2%. And you say, well, wait a second. I don't have the car. Why am I paying for anything? And they're saying, no, that's the savings.
In the same year the settlement was made public, executive compensation at Edison shot up 71%. And in the days after the deal was announced, the company's stock rose 9%. That may be why former PUC President Peavy sent an email after the deal was disclosed that said, quote, Wall Street really likes the settlement. Meanwhile, customers in San Diego County continue to have some of the highest electric bills in the country. I'm Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
Dramatic cuts on the way for power plants around the nation. President Obama announced new regulations today as part of his Clean Power Plan. He calls it the single most important step the country has taken to fight climate change.
And we're the first generation to feel the impact of climate change. We're the last generation that can do something about it. We only get one home. We only get one planet. There's no plan B.
The president's plan requires states to cut carbon emission by 32% by 2030. In California, Governor Jerry Brown ordered a 40% cut in greenhouse gases by the same deadline. Opponents plan to sue to block new environmental rules from taking effect. An insanity claim rejected in the Colorado theater shooting trial. Today, a jury rejected a request to eliminate execution as an option in the sentencing phase for convicted gunman James Holmes. The jury will decide between the death penalty or life in prison without parole for the former San Diegan. 3 years ago, Holmes shot and killed 12 people during the attack. His lawyers are pushing for a life term because they say mental illness caused Holmes to kill. Demanding tighter gun controls today, comedian Amy Schumer announced plans with her cousin, New York Senator Chuck Schumer, to make it harder for violent criminals and the mentally ill to obtain guns. A gunman killed 2 women last month inside a Louisiana movie theater screening Schumer's new movie, Trainwreck. Accusations of bad behavior leveled at Democratic County Supervisor Dave Roberts. That prompted Republican Escondido Mayor Sam Abed to run against him. iNewsSource reporter Joe Girardi says there is now evidence the negative publicity may have hurt Roberts' fundraising.
When the bad news started coming out of Roberts' office in mid-April, his campaign had already raised more than $50,000 for the 2016 election. In the following 2.5 months, he brought in a little over $12,000. The supervisor says his campaign shifted its focus from fundraising to refuting the accusations.
We chose to de-emphasize our fundraising since these allegations, and I will call them false allegations, came out.
For his part, Abed only started fundraising in early June. Between then and the end of the month, he pulled in almost $12,000. That's more than 3 times the money Roberts raised in that period. Abed campaign consultant John Franklin held that up as proof of his candidate's competitiveness. But Abed will have to maintain a brisk pace. Roberts still has nearly 8 times as much money in the bank. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Joe Girardi.
Follow the campaign money online. We have a searchable database of campaign contributions at inewsource.org. Water as a precious resource. New signs show Americans are backing water-saving measures. A national survey of more than 1,000 people polled show most think water is a limited resource. A majority of people say farmers' access to water should be protected. The AP survey comes as California water agencies are under the gun to meet water cut targets. Depleted reservoirs, another grim reminder of California's drought. The State Department of Water Resources shot this video of 3 Northern California reservoirs. Take a look, all recording below average lake levels. Wildfires racing out of control as thousands of California firefighters respond to the state of emergency. 21 active fires burning right now. Most of them are in Northern California. Some were sparked by lightning. The Rocky Fire tripled in size over the weekend, growing to 60,000 acres with 12% containment. San Diego firefighters are helping with the fight tonight across the state with 4 engine strike teams and 8 hand crews. Paying of higher education while serving time. We first told you about a plan to use federal college funding for inmates. Peggy Pico talks with a former prisoner who started hitting the books behind bars and turned his life around.
Michael Braun was in prison from early 1997 to late 2000, serving a 4-year prison sentence for a drug conviction. Now he's a criminal justice professor at San Diego State University. Michael Braun, welcome to Evening Edition.
Thank you.
Now, 15 years ago, you were serving time in prison. You won your appeal on your drug conviction, but during your incarceration, you were enrolled in community college classes. What was that like?
That was, it was nice. It was good. It was one of the things that actually got me through the system. While I was incarcerated, my mom scraped some money together and had me take some classes each semester. And while I was taking those classes, I was able to learn about sociology, and then that got me all geared up to actually go out and get my degree when I got out of prison.
And what kind of impact did it have you when you were actually serving your sentence?
So while I was walking around inside the prison, it actually helped me form an identity about myself that was much different than what I had going in. And that identity centered around being a student, seeing myself as intelligent, seeing myself as worthy of success. And then it also gave me an acute sense of injustice that I was seeing about myself that I really wanted to go and work towards when I got out, addressing.
Now, when you were studying, this was not through a Pell Grant program. This was actually, you were in a broom closet type of education center, right, you called it,
yeah,
and watching videos. What did those videos tell you?
Yeah, so what the videos were is they were live tapings of an actual college course that was happening on the community college campus. And so they were just normal correspondence courses that anybody could take. And so there was a process to getting those tapes into the institution, and I got access to them and I watched them on a VCR.
The new pilot program announced last week would offer Pell Grants to some prisoners who would qualify. As a professor now who teaches criminal justice, what does research tell us about the impact of post-secondary educational programs for prisoners?
Yeah, well, the research is quite clear on this, actually. For a number of years, actually well over a decade, a number of researchers have done studies on this and found that there's a substantial decrease in the amount of recidivism that prisoners who receive post-secondary education, when they come out. Recidivism is the reduction of committing a crime, right? And so the numbers that are often cited are about 43% of prisoners don't commit another crime within the first 3 years, and that's the most important time. Is that first 3 years for a prisoner.
Sure, and it's actually quite a bit. 700,000 inmates actually return each year, and this would drop it down to almost half of that.
Right, yeah, we're talking about a good 300,000 people not coming back into the prison system.
And some lawmakers, of course, have criticized this Pell Grant pilot program, saying that, you know, aside from, you know, that basically that this is, prison should be for punishment and taxpayers shouldn't pay for that. What is your response to that?
Yeah, well, taxpayers are paying for it. They're paying paying for it in the form of incarceration costs. The average incarceration cost is over $30,000 per year per prisoner. And so when you have someone going into the system, you're paying $30,000 per year, and then they come out, commit another crime, they go back, and you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of their trajectory through a prison sentence. The RAND study that we were talking about earlier, when they found that 43% reduction in recidivism, they also found that for every dollar that we spend at the front end of the system, we get $5 back in terms of getting a prisoner out the door into gainful employment, the money that they pay back into the system. Like myself, for example, my paycheck gets dinged pretty good, and it goes back to the state.
What other strategies would you like to see implemented as far as when it comes to local, state, and even federal programs for prisoners to address kind of re-entry back into the community?
Well, there's two things. One, it should be noted that we have currently, there's a conversation happening at the CSU talking about what kinds of programs we can extend to currently incarcerated and people who have come out. So that's happening. But it's also important to note that education by itself isn't enough. There's no silver bullet to getting people back out the door and into a good lawful life. But what we found is that, you know, people who go through prison and people who've going through crime, and they experience a number of stress, right? Employment, living conditions, traumatic experiences, right? And so if we wanted to actually talk about what we can do for people and so they don't come back, we have to talk about and address it from a multi-systemic venues, right? So we have to talk about drug treatment, cognitive behavioral treatments and therapies, and we have to talk about getting people housing and getting people jobs. It's one thing to talk about getting people education, but then it doesn't do them any good if they can't find any place to live or where to work.
All right, criminal justice professor Michael Braun, thank you so much.
Thank you.
San Diego VA leaders provided an update today on care for veterans. It comes after scandals elsewhere rocked the agency over long waits for medical treatment and disability claims. In San Diego, customer service and parking are some of the biggest challenges.
One of our biggest challenges is parking at La Jolla, the main hospital.
It's also a problem at the VA regional office in Mission Valley, where several administrators talked about efforts to reorganize and streamline VA systems.
But we know we have to ensure that veterans who come for care don't wait to get a parking space.
In the past 6 months, the agency has converted 100 staff parking spaces to more patient parking, with a new facility under construction. VA San Diego is also dealing with complaints about its employees. From phone operator delays to rude security officers, Jeff Gearing is the agency's director.
We're in the process of recruiting a new chief of police. That one of the big things we're looking for is customer service. It's our top priority, I think, with that leader in police service to connect with the veterans.
The VA's regional director says it's taken several years of employee overtime to reduce the backlog of first-time disability claims from 20,000 2 years ago down to about 3,500 today.
Basically, each employee that's a decision maker here in the service center has been working 20 hours per month of mandatory overtime.
But finding enough doctors or psychiatrists to treat one of the largest concentrations of vets from Iraq and Afghanistan is an ongoing problem.
Some of it's a pay issue, some of it is just a quality of life workload issue too. It can be very stressful seeing patients with serious mental illness hour after hour after hour.
By the way, the wait time for appealing a VA disability claim is still a sticking point. It takes about 199 days in San Diego. The national average is about 400 days. A lesson in resources at the War Memorial in Balboa Park today. Veterans were given an overview of the wide range of benefits available to them and their families. The county Veterans Resource Analyst says educating more than 1 million veterans about their benefits can be challenging, especially since the number is growing.
We get between 300 and 500 transitioning service members per month coming out of the big major military bases here. Tremendous amount of service that are available.
Even folks just leaving the service may not understand the number of benefits available, like the county's program to waive college tuition for family members of veterans. Lifting the ban on gay troop leaders, many are praising last week's policy change by the Boy Scouts of America. Now Peggy Pico explains how religious-affiliated troops may use religious exemptions to get around the new rule.
The statement from the Boy Scouts of America's National Executive Board says in part, troops affiliated with religious organizations may continue to use religious beliefs as criteria for selecting adult leaders, including matters of sexuality. KPBS contacted several local religious affiliated Boy Scout troops for this interview. None responded. Joining me with more on the policy change are my guest, Eagle Scout Chance Kawar, now a college student who supports gay Scout leaders, and Howard Menzer, former Scout leader and now president of the group Scouting for All. And Howard, what is your reaction to the decision to lift the ban on gay leaders in the Boy Scouts?
I'm elated. 3 weeks before Dr. Gates made his announcement, I sent him a letter, in part saying, you take a young man, a young boy, into Tiger Cubs, bring him into Cub Scouts, teach him, bring him across the bridge into Boy Scouts, teach him leadership and skills and teaching and all this stuff. And here he is at 17 earning his Eagle Award, and you say, okay, kid, here's your badge, now get out. What a waste of energy and resources. They would enrich Scouting.
And it appears they took that to heart. They made the decision. Chance, this exemption that allows for religious affiliated troops to still ban people who are gay being Boy Scout leaders, does it undermine the victory for equality?
I think so, yeah. Like Howard, I was very excited last week when I found out that the Boy Scouts was changing their policy. And I think this is, without question, a huge step forward for the organization. But I do think it's a partial victory. Allowing discrimination to continue in some troops creates a sort of patchwork policy that's still sending a mixed message to the youth of the organization that you're not valued as much as other Scouts. And so I don't think that that's acceptable. And while I appreciate that the policy is moving in the right direction, there's still work to be done.
And Howard, what have you heard from local Boy Scout affiliate chapters that about the ban being lifted?
Everybody I've spoken to is very happy with it. The way it went to now is the way it was in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. The chartering organization decided the makeup of the troop, so that if a priest decided he only wanted kids from his parish, or if he decided he only wanted blue-eyed kids, it was okay, so long as they ran the Scouting program. But there had to be enough open and accepting charter organizations to accept everybody. You can't just take a church and say, change your policy, guys. They're obligated to the Pope, not to the Boy Scouts of America.
I see. Now, Chance, let me ask you this. What did Scouting do for your life? You were an Eagle Scout that actually inspired you to keep up the fight for this organization to lift the ban.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in the organization just about as long as I can remember. I was saying earlier that I remember the first Cub Scout meeting that I went to with my dad when I was in first grade. And it's always been a very special organization for me because it taught me, it built my character, it taught me the morals and values that I think have made me into the young individual that I am today. And I think part of that is the Scout law. It teaches us to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And so I try to embody those values in everything I do. And part of that means standing up for justice and equality in all parts of life.
All right. And Howard, we have to end this very shortly, but I want to ask, would you be willing to go back, or do you want to go back to the Scouts now that the ban has been lifted?
I've already been speaking to a crew, and I've already been speaking to a Scout troop about coming back.
All right. Good to hear. Howard Menzer and Chance Kawar, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks to a $3 million grant, the old Copley YMCA in City Heights will be undergoing a renovation, but the city had to move fast to get the money. YMCA gave this building back to the city in January. In just over 8 months, the city was able to get a $3.1 million grant. There are also plans to build a new skate park at the location. San Diego International Fringe Festival wrapped last night with an award ceremony. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando was there.
The 2015 Fringe Awards were held last night at the Madhouse Comedy Club in Horton Plaza, with many of the winners in attendance. Founder and executive director Kevin Charles Patterson hosted the awards that were determined by critics, audience feedback, and ticket sales. One of the big winners was Les Midge, an unexpected journey of Hobbit proportions. Imagine if Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland were live-action role players, and you'd get Les Midge, which took home Best Directing and Best Musical. Scenes from Mars 1, now with 68% less gravity, won for Best Comedy, and Scott Eric Burgess had the Best Acceptance Speech.
I've written a speech.
A well-deserved Outstanding Physical Theater Award went to Mexico's The Other Don Quixote, which mixed clowning with the magic of silent movies. Other top winners were Tears of the Knife from Bodhi Tree Concerts winning Critics' Pick, Frontera from Circus Collective of San Diego taking Best Circus Show, and the breathtaking dance and aerial work of Windgrove Studios' Save My Soul went home with Best of Fringe.
I thank Fringe for the opportunity. I thank my amazing cast and crew, and this has been the most amazing ride. Thank you so much.
The awards proved that Fringe 2015 kept its promise of delivering eyeball-busting entertainment. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.